Thank you for being here this morning. I know of 2 or 3 who couldn't come today for the first session, but many thanks to George Grove for recording. So if you do miss a session or you'd like to go back and see something, it will eventually be on the YouTube, and the links will be on our website if you don't know how to get to the YouTube. So that's all going to be there.
Warren, may I also mention that Tom said to be sure when people are talking to talk through a mic.
Yeah, I have the microphone ready.
The tape does not pick up conversation.
Yeah. So I know some of you hate to have a microphone in front of you, but it's so that the recordings can get your voices, okay? Or else no one will actually hear anything. Yeah. Oh, more good. Oh, good. Hey, Barbara. Okay. Well, we are going to start, and I am hoping we'll have some time to do a short video shortly. Anyway, we'll get back to that. We're going to start with a prayer, and then I'm going to do a brief review of the whole concept of the living compass itself. Now, I know many of you have been to the series that use the booklets like this. Who is here for the first time that has not been part of? Oh, okay. So it will be worth going through and talking about that. That's great. And everyone has a booklet, right? There's one extra one left. There is one extra one.
If you need more, I get it on email.
Oh, okay.
So somebody could have my book.
Okay. That's great to know. Well, let's start with a prayer, and then we're going to do a little bit of an intro, and then we'll get right into our theme about practicing compassion, which is the theme for this Lenten series. And specifically today, for week 1, it's about compassion and faith. Okay. So let us pray. Today and all the days of my life, grant me the strength to examine my heart. May I be faithful, God, to your gift of truth in me. Amen. What I'd like you to do, because you do have your book, let's turn to page 8. Page 8. And it's a brief overview of the living compass. The whole idea about the living compass and this organization that puts together these studies is that the living compass, and my bad drawing here, heart, soul, mind, strength, they see everything integrated. It's all part of the wholeness of life. That whatever impacts one area of life, positively or negatively, has an impact on the other. So if there's something going on in one quadrant, it's going to affect another part of your life. Does everyone agree with that? I think we could, right? So areas of wellness, and we're going to start with the heart on the top, sort of left side. And you see on page 8 that the heart itself deals with relationships, the ability to create and maintain healthy, life-giving connections with others, and also deals with handling emotions, the ability to process, express, and receive emotions in a healthy way. So you can understand, again, it's something within that quadrant of the compass, something within your relationships or something within your emotions is being impacted. It's going to have an effect on your body, on your mind. All those areas are going to be impacted. So then we'll go to soul on the top right. Spirituality. So within their understanding of soul. Spirituality, the ability to connect with a higher purpose in life and to have a clear set of beliefs, morals, and values that guides our actions. And then for soul, also in and soul, rest and play. Rest and play. Something we don't always do very much of or don't do it well. The ability to balance work and play and to renew oneself. And that is so important, and especially during this time of Lent when we are called to step aside a bit, maybe to step outside the busyness of life and some of our the anxiousness of what sometimes dominates our life. That we need to learn how to balance work and play and busyness. And again, when we are out of balance in that area, it does affect everything else. Strength, bottom right quadrant. Resilience is one of the top areas. The ability to deal positively with the adversities of life. And then care for the body, which also works very well with rest and play in the soul quadrant. The ability to build healthy habits and practices regarding our physical well-being, as well as the ability to end unhealthy ones. And that's sometimes more of a challenge. And then mind, the bottom left quadrant. Vocation. The ability to align our life's purpose with the gifts and talents we've been given. And we need to sometimes go deeper into what has God given us? What talents do we have that we don't yet know about, or perhaps we know about but never have the opportunity to deepen and expand and to grow with. There's a lot of parts of us that we don't get a chance to express, perhaps, because everything else seems to be the dominant or get in the way. And then organization, the ability to keep track of and make good use of possessions, money and time. A bit of stewardship of self also. Any questions about this? Because everything that we do will deal with aspects of this sort of living compass, as they call it. The daily reflections, the sections of the daily parts about making it personal, like we'll have questions and asking you to journal and to think. We'll always touch on one of those quadrants. So that each guest writer will deal with something through the week. And you may have noticed that for those who've done it before, the Monday, the Tuesday, the Wednesday reflections will all touch on something different. And each week, of course, will have its own theme, specific theme. So any comments about that? Any questions? Especially for those who have never used this resource before. Okay, how about for those who have been part of this before and have used this, how has it benefited you to get a broader sense of the various sort of aspects of life, of whether heart, soul, mind, or strength? For those who are new to it, would anyone like to share just of your own experience? Anything?
No.
Bobby?
It brings to mind, yeah.
Just because of the recording.
I find that it brings to mind things that you might not think about and look at things in a different way.
So what we're going to do first, we always start with a prayer. And today, again, I just wanted to give a bit of a brief overview of the living compass aspect. But we always start with just quieting ourselves down, getting ourselves ready. And I'd like to take that time right now for a few moments. So what we're going to do, similar to what Pam High did last night, but not as long. Relax yourself, sit comfortably, close close your eyes, but don't go to sleep. But imagine a place that you enjoy being at. It could be, by water, maybe the ocean, or a lake, a quiet lakeside, or a quiet spot in your own yard, perhaps. Whatever is your special place, just take a moment, and then just breathe in slowly, breathe in deeply, and hold it for a moment. And then slowly breathe out. So you're breathing in peace and love and health, and breathing out stress and burdens. And just do that a few times. And we're going to just sort of be quiet for about 2 minutes. When you're ready, just take another deep breath, let out, and just open your eyes. Again, for the benefit of those who are part of this for the first time, it's encouraged when you do your daily readings that you find a place. It could be in your house, it could be in your garden, when it's not snowing. Create a spot that is yours. So not in front of the TV, okay? Not in a place in your house that has commotion, maybe a lot of noise, but create a little spot that is yours. And some of you may already have that, and I know some of you do. It's your special reading spot, or your special just meditation spot. But to create something, if you don't already have one. And the daily readings, they're very short. They're extremely short. A page and a half, maybe. And take time. You could also, some people find it helps to have some light music in the background, maybe something gentle, perhaps, if you're using it as a time to read and then just reflect and to pray. Maybe light a candle. Whatever helps you become focused for this 10, 15 minutes a day. Just do that for yourself. Make it your special time.
They have beautiful scented candles at Ross and TJ Maxx.
Oh, scented candles, yeah. Yeah, so things like that. Whatever helps you becomes your tool. And also, you'll notice in the booklets themselves, there'll be areas you can write. There might, for example, on a page, but to journal. And journaling, it's almost like having a diary. Okay? It's your personal thoughts from when you read something. So when you the first Sunday in Lent, for example, I'm going to talk about that in a few moments. Lori Brock, who we were very fortunate to meet at our clergy conference just recently. She's a horse person, if you couldn't talks about her horse, Nina. When she talks about the horse and the mash of bran and oats and all these various things, images come to your mind. So journaling is about putting down your thoughts as you're reading some of this. What comes to your mind? What comes to your mind? And journaling, you could even draw something too. Okay, it doesn't always have to be words. But when you read these daily reflections, you could underline, you could highlight, you could circle, you could write a note, and you can write it in the margins if you don't want to get a book or a pad and use it as a journal. Just write something down, because what you reflect on may help someone else. And what I usually do at the beginning of each session, so starting next session, I ask about what you reflected on, or what sort of struck you, words, phrases, something from the last few days or the last session. Because what you share, and those who've been through it know, tends to make someone else think. It might trigger another thought. It might trigger an emotion. Whatever it is that you have, don't think, my thoughts aren't, no one will want to hear my thoughts, or they're not really important. You don't know that. You don't know that what you say or think won't be special to someone else. So take time, even if you don't specifically share it, write it down. Because you can go back and look at it, or see what you circled or underlined. In 2-3 weeks from now, a certain theme might strike you. You've experienced something in the day and go back, oh yeah, I remember that Scott Stoner, he wrote something, and you could go back and then you already have it sort of highlighted or underlined. Okay? Just little practices that might help you. I do want to start, and we're going to talk about scraping out our buckets. Now, that's a direct quote coming from Lori Brock. So she first talks about Lent, and I want to talk about that. And if you wanted to follow, it's on page 19, towards the bottom, middle of the page. And it's about Lent. So we're in a season which is very special. And as I mentioned on Sunday, I actually like the season of Lent. Some grew up, it was, very, austere, you had to give up stuff. Oh, I hate Lent, you got to get through it, these weeks. I just want to get to Easter, right? But Lent is a time which can be very special. And she says here that, we go through a lot of emotions, desires, expectations, hurts, disappointments, and so on. And that it's helpful to do the reflecting, to do the chewing, the gnawing, deal with the grudges, the shame, the angers, and how do we do that? How do we do that, she says? Because feelings accumulate. Feelings accumulate. And when feelings accumulate, they start affecting this, and they throw us off balance. So, especially the negative feelings about self. Sometimes we're the hardest on ourselves, aren't we? Feelings about other people. All these things accumulate, and she says here, all this stuff that builds up leaves little room to hold the things Jesus shares with us. So when we clutter ourselves with a lot of emotions and hurts and angers and expectations that maybe our life didn't go as we were hoping it would go. We were younger, we had all these plans. All these things accumulate, and Lent is a good time to declutter. We all do it periodically in our houses, maybe. Then and you go to a garage sale and you get more stuff. Bring it home. But it's very clear on a spiritual side. So when you're talking about heart and soul, as we accumulate all this other stuff inside of us, it leaves, as she says, little room in our own lives for Jesus to share and to touch our lives. But when we declutter, and we can use Lent in a way to help address some of the burdens and the emotions and the negativities and the disappointments and so on, then we have not only room to take in what Jesus is offering, but we in turn then can share with other people, she says. And she says, Lent, on page 20, Lent is a holy reminder that we all need to take time to scrape out the muck, the slurry, the stuff that either was never helpful or perhaps was, but now no longer nourishes our hearts, minds, bodies, and souls. Lent is a focused season of prayer, of study, of contemplation, of worship, and is the perfect season for allowing Jesus to help us with the process of clearing out the stuff from our souls that is obscuring our love for God and for each other and for ourselves. What I'd like you to do now is take 5-6 minutes or so, and at your tables, talk about that. So that's the quote she has at the top of page 20. How does that strike you? Do you agree with her? Do you disagree with her? Do you say, yeah, that's me? You know, how do her words impact you at this point, right now, March 2nd, 2023? And for George's sake, on the camera, normally during the little discussion times, we just put the camera on pause and let the people talk, and then we turn it back on for the discussions. So about 5 minutes, 6 minutes. We're gonna continue on, but I do want to hear some of your thoughts. And I heard some thoughts from one table. Please use a microphone so that we can get it recorded. Any comments or thoughts that came out of your short discussion? Yeah, Bobby.
The idea of being compassionate with yourself was startling and helpful.
And yes, and that was also mentioned at this table here. We are going to get onto compassion. Being compassion for yourself. You said that was startling. Why was that startling?
I never thought of it. I never thought of that. I know what compassion is towards other people, but I never thought of applying that to myself.
Anyone else have a similar thought or something to add to that? What Bobby just shared?
I was saying the same thing. Like I just said this week, I didn't feel well. And I sat down on the couch, and then I started feeling guilty. The furniture needed to be dusted. The floor needed to be swept. I needed to go to the grocery store to buy vegetables, and I was being really hard on myself. And then I picked up this book and started reading it. If someone else that I was with didn't feel well, I would say, sit down, put your feet up, relax.
Right.
But I wasn't giving myself that same compassion.
So we can see what we need to do for others, but not for ourselves, right? And that is so true. And we're the hardest on ourselves too. We're our greatest critics. But when it comes to taking care, we're not always very good.
What came to mind as I was thinking about stuff the buck. Is it, part of it goes back to last year's emphasis on letting go.
Yes.
And it's okay to have a whole bunch of stuff you need to do. And I'm one of the best procrastinators around. I'll do this later. I can't do this now. Oh, you're the best. You're the worst. And so, but that becomes a burden. And so finally, I think what came to me was the idea of letting go. And don't worry about that. Just,
Right. So clearing out, scraping out the buckets. And that's all related to what's been said. Anyone else want to add to that?
I do.
Okay, on.
Thank you, Father, for clearing out the bucket. I think it's really hard to do alone. I have been very much alone, so I can speak to that as quite an expert. But I knew a group of women. I was not part of them. I wished I was. But they would go to each other's home. There was about 8 of them. And every single year they'd go to each other's home and clean the home. And they knew each other. They were all single. It wouldn't matter, but they all knew each other. And they were there for each other through the rest of the year. I just was amazed at that group. So I love them.
What a wonderful faith in action also. Anything from this table here? Pat, did you want to say? And then continue on.
We were talking about scraping out the bucket. We didn't get to passion for ourselves yet.
So how do you scrape out the bucket? How do you identify that?
Well,
Scraped out the bucket and put it in the garage.
that's what a lot of us do. We don't really get rid of it.
Don't get rid of it.
And so, one of the things I've noticed when I walk around in Green Valley and when people open the garage doors is they're totally full of boxes and things that they've determined to keep and burden themselves with. And they leave their expensive cars out on the ramp to be destroyed by the sun here. And it's irrational, I think, but it's also not helpful.
Thank you. So that's a really good illustration about what Lori Brock says, how we accumulate, but when we accumulate so much of these other things that affect our lives, it doesn't allow room for God to give us gifts, to work in our lives, and to help us then to help other people. So when we're burdened down and handicapped, then we're not only hurting ourselves, we can't help anyone else. So that's all part of it. I want to talk about compassion, since we already started jumping on that, and that, of course, the theme is practicing compassion. That's for our Lenten study. I want to read you something from page 15, and this was from Thursday, February 23rd. One thing about this week is we have extra days that we had a chance to read because we're only meeting now. Right around the middle of the page, it says, it's important to know that as people of faith, our compassion and love for others flow from our relationship with God. If our love and compassion for others are grounded only in our own strength and efforts, we will be inconsistent at best. When it is grounded in God's love and is an expression of that love flowing through us, our compassion will be deeper and sustained. So But when we try to do it all on our own, when it's not grounded in God, we might be able to do something of a compassionate nature, but we won't be able to sustain it. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that, about having to be grounded in God's love as an expression of compassion, and not just our own personal efforts. Anybody?
I won't be long. I'm just greatly relieved. It's not up to me anymore.
What came to my mind was how when you're on the airplane, they tell you to put your own oxygen mask on first before you turn to help your child or help others. And so we need to be filled up first before we can think about being compassionate to others.
When I read this, I don't want to sound negative, but I have difficulty distinguishing between those two. Because what comes from your own strength, hopefully, has come from God. So how do you distinguish that from what she's saying about your compassion has to come from your relationship with God? I don't see the distinction.
So that's a good question. Compassion hopefully is coming from God. And that might be the start for some people. But the ongoing nourishment, if we're not in prayer, if we're not in growing in our own faith, constantly tapping into God, I think what Scott Stoner is saying is it can't be sustained. Doesn't mean it's not coming from God, because it has to start somewhere. If compassion is an expression of God's love, then yes, exactly what Reverend Judy is saying. It's coming from God, because that's why we're acting. But just like exercising or being a runner or whatever you're doing, you have to properly nourish your body and your mind and your soul to be let's say, an Olympic athlete. There's constant need every day. A lot of us fall short in that we think a Sunday morning once a week or every 2 or 3 weeks a month is enough. And I don't think that's enough. It's about daily. It's about daily prayer, daily reflection, meditation, whatever it is that nourishes you and helps this part, the wholeness part, exist. So yes, it starts with God, because it's an expression of God's love. But if we don't sustain ourselves by constantly tapping into the Holy Spirit to allow us to be continuing in the root of compassion, it won't be sustainable. And I think that's what Scott's trying to get at. I saw hands going up. One here, and then Donna.
I think we're coming at this from a religious perspective. I mean, but I think what he's saying is that a lot of the world lives without God at all. And I think Judy maybe has never tried to live without God, so she doesn't know the emptiness of that approach. It's not, but, and I've done a lot, I have lived in there, tried to just sort of do life on my own power, out of my own wisdom, and that did not work.
And isn't that kind of what's there?
That's what he's saying, yeah. We can't do it. And then once I turned to God, I found this incredible strengthening, So I don't know, maybe no one here has lived without God, but
Donna had a comment. Did you share it? Also. So how do you keep tapping into God to provide the wisdom, the direction, the strength, the courage,
All those things
right?
you said.
All those things that are needed to keep it happening, right? And I'm going to show you in a few moments a video about a city, Billings, Montana, that had a courage to deal with something.
Well, just a quick comment from what Barbara said about the mask. I had read or heard somewhere that the reason we're told to do that is because our natural inclination is to take care of somebody else first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, humanity. I mean, that's just good things, but we need to be reminded to take care of ourselves.
Which opens up a whole other thing about God is present in everyone.
Yes.
And God wants to work through everyone, even those who don't even know or believe in God. So.
My comment was about the sustainability, and when we look back to the COVID experience that we all went through, how come some of the compassionate caregivers, nurses, doctors, burned out entirely, and yet so many sustained it?
That's a very good question. That would be interesting.
And God
to,
is in everyone.
yeah.
Those
That would be an
sustained it
interesting discussion
recognize
with
God.
some of those caregivers.
Yeah.
What helped them? What helped them through that time? And I wonder what proportion of people leaned on their faith.
Even without realizing it.
Without,
Oh,
that's
God,
right.
get me through this.
Right. Any last comments? Because I'd like to try show you a video if I can get it working. Okay. This is about Billings, Montana, and it happened several years ago, where there was some racial problems and religious problems, and how a community had compassion for those who were victims and how they responded. One other thing here. So we talked about our capacity to offer compassion to others is also related to receiving God's compassion for ourselves. So if we have experienced compassion, that also helps us to have compassion for other people. Okay? So I'm hoping this will work. I haven't done this. I'm not the techie person like George over there. So, and let's see if it works. And George, if you can zero in if it comes on. Okay.
This is Billings, Montana. One winter a few years ago, the people here found some simple ways to draw together by taking a stand against hate and intolerance. We told their story in a PBS special called Not in Our Town. Their actions inspired communities all over the country to do the same. When hate happens or someone is attacked or a church is burned, respond. Hate crimes happen every day in this country, but they're often ignored. The people of Billings, Montana decided not to look the other way. And here's what they did that inspired other communities to do the same. When a Native American family's home was defaced with racist graffiti,
Just twirl around there for a bit. What did you see?
Terrific. More people would do that. I mean,
It's everywhere, the hate. But if more people would respond and rally like this group, this is amazing. Wow.
Any other observations or comments?
it's compassion.
Yeah, so how is compassion, how is compassion being lived out in those two examples? So the graffiti on the houses and then the other issues with the African American congregation.
If you hurt someone else, you hurt me.
Taking action.
Right.
I found it very, very moving, even in that short time. You know, I was almost in tears and it's only been playing for 2 minutes. So, very moving and very impactful.
Anything else from around here, and then I'll go over there.
It was the true, showing the true meaning of compassion, of seeing something, feeling for those people, and then doing something.
Right. Okay. So, a couple comments here, and then we're going to talk about, I don't know if we'll get that back or not, we're going to talk about the differences between empathy, sympathy, and compassion. Okay.
I think one of the things that struck me at the very first example about the graffiti was an individual felt so moved to do something. And I mean, anytime you turn on a news program today or open a newspaper, there's some awful thing that has happened to somebody. And it's just easier to sit back in your easy chair and shake your head and, oh, isn't that terrible? And just go on with your life. But to find a way that you, even if nobody else, if you're the only one to do something about it, that takes a lot of courage and a lot of compassion.
Courage. Yes, courage. Courage is definitely part of that. It would take courage for people to get out there and cover up terrible graffiti, or courage to go and sit in another congregation to show support for one that was being attacked. It takes a lot of courage.
I liked the painter that was not very outgoing and said he didn't do things, but he got in there and he did it, and how it made him feel. And I think it's so hard if you are not involved already, or you're just not in that world to start or do, and that's where other people have to take you along, or it's not going to happen.
Well, I'm just going to turn that off. It's something you can find on your own on YouTube. It's called Not in Our Town, Billings, Montana. It's about 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, but I'll tell you the second half of that video, how the whole city got involved. There was a 6-year-old boy named Isaac. And there's not a lot of Jewish families in Billings, Montana, you can probably imagine. The 6-year-old boy, with the holiday of Hanukkah, he put a drawing of a menorah. You know what a menorah is? You know, it holds the candles. In his window of his bedroom, 6 years old, right? To celebrate Hanukkah. Someone threw a brick through his window. Okay. Fortunately, the boy wasn't in the room. He wasn't hurt. No one was hurt. But it goes on to show the mother, talks to the news about it. And how do you explain to a 6-year-old boy about hate? So what happened, what Billings did, or God started, they started to talk about the incident, or someone started, and it started spreading. And what they did, they started to provide pictures of a menorah, like on paper, and ask people to put it in their windows.
They were in the newspaper.
They were in the newspaper.
They came with the newspaper.
Yeah, that's right. It was in the newspaper. And then houses and businesses started to do it. And I think if you listen to the video, it says 10,000 people participated in that. Compassion and faith work together. Faith is the grounding with God, as we heard, but it has to include action. It's not enough to say, oh, that's so sad, right? So hard to see that. Yeah, it is hard to see that, but what are you going to do about it? Last night, Ken and Pam talked about the ecology needs, that you can start doing things. You can start recycling, but you could also, at the other end, start lobbying those who make the decisions at the government levels, state, federal, whatever. It's the action part. So action is so important, where it changes the dimension of it. And that's where I want to talk about here, empathy, sympathy, and compassion. So empathy is the experience of a feeling that another person has. So an example was given, like, any pet owners here? I know there's a few. Or have owned a pet at some point, a cat, a dog, a bird, a snake. When someone else has a loved pet that gets sick and maybe dies, and you've been through it yourself, you know exactly, and you actually enter into that pain with the other person. That's an empathy. That's what empathy is. Sympathy means you're moved by the experience. So you saw something on TV. Thousands killed by an earthquake. Well, I haven't personally experienced an earthquake, so I can't. Although I can have empathy because I know what it means to lose someone you love to death, or to tragedy. But sympathy is more about not experiencing the pain, but we feel bad for the suffering. We feel bad, and that's what sympathy is. We said, so it's different than here. But compassion draws both of these in. We feel, we are moved by the pain, we feel the pain or the circumstance, and then we have compassion, which is the desire to lessen the pain, the hurt, the suffering, the hunger, whatever it is in someone else. So this is the action part. Jesus, it says, when Jesus saw the crowds that were following him, he had compassion on them. And he had them sit down, the loaves and fish. They were hungry. So he didn't just say, oh, I feel sorry for these people. They should have gone to the store before they came here. He did something about it. So compassion is doing something. Compassion ties right in with our mission, to be the heart and hands of Jesus in the world, right? Sorry, Judy?
As soon as you started talking about that, adding the word action up there to compassion, this isn't something new in our times.
No.
If you go back to the letter of James, what does he say? Faith without works is essentially nothing. You show your faith by your action.
Right. Thank you. Which is exactly what that whole story in Billings, Montana was about. I mean, think about 10,000 people feeling the pain of what that family went through, for example, with that brick through the window, and saying, not in our town, not here, not going to happen here. And we are together, we are one people. Sorry.
My question back on the billing story, to me, it's easy to feel compassion for the people that had the graffiti, for the little boy with the brick through the window. But I feel we must have compassion, too, for the people that did it, for the hate they feel.
So what do you say to that?
They're,
So let's-
they're God's children.
That they're God's children too.
And they're filled with hate.
Okay. So you have skinheads or whoever they are.
Very dislikable people.
Let's take, this will be our last discussion because we're already at 11 o'clock. Let's take 5 minutes or so. How do you have compassion on the perpetrators? And what did Jesus do when he was crucified? What did he do?
Forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Right? So I'm not saying it's an easy thing.
No.
It's probably one of the hardest things to do when someone's harmed you or harmed someone you care about or even harmed someone you don't even know. So take 5 minutes. Is compassion just for some people or is it for all people? Right? How does Jesus deal with that too? So that's an interesting one. I'm going to
Make a quick comment. The thing that's really important with the Billings thing is that the leader, the sheriff or whoever he was, said, this is not right. This is wrong. If we had more leaders in this country who would say, this is not right, we're not going to go along with this.
yes.
What a wonderful world this would be.
So, yeah. And there are other expressions that could be said about people who need to have something more to stand up and sit and be strong. Okay, so 5 minutes or so, just quickly, and then we'll have to finish.
One of my medical teachers that forget that the most unlovable kids are the ones that need love the most.
Your teacher, I think, is these people that do these things, not like that, but they're producing in the same newspaper a day later.
Okay, we need to wrap it up. Would anyone like to share quickly, based on the question, how do you have compassion for someone who is on the other side?
Prayer.
Okay, so let's quickly. Anybody?
Prayer. God, give me the grace to be compassionate to these people that are so filled with hate.
Prayer.
We can't do it alone.
No. Anyone else?
And what I always remind myself is walk a mile in my moccasins before you judge me. And I try to remember God, to remember that.
Okay. Anyone from here?
Does everyone remember the movement that was back in the 90s? What would Jesus do movement?
What would Jesus do?
And a lot, as Christians, we can say, if we're confronting a situation, we can say, well, what would Jesus do? Because we can remember all the parables in the Bible, how compassionate he was towards the woman at the well, and, by the road, whatever.
Right. Okay, so today, it's a start. We have several more weeks to go. Compassion. It's much deeper than I think maybe we may have thought. And just very quickly, so again, we're only briefly into it for a week. has your perception or your thoughts changed at all just from our discussion today about what this might be? Or is it, or is it supporting what you thought? I'm just curious. This is just more for me, just a quick comment or two. Anybody? It is? Okay.
Yeah. Incredible.
Incredible.
Thank you.
Okay. I think it's going to be a very interesting several weeks together. And please, if you haven't read all the days since Ash Wednesday, because it starts on Ash Wednesday, the daily reflections, just go back, catch up. But for next week, bring with you any thoughts that you may have from the daily readings. Okay? We'll have some time to review if there's anything else. And that video, just go onto YouTube, or just Google it, but go onto YouTube and you'll find that video. It's only about 5 minutes and change. It's very, very moving. So next week, starting with Sunday, the second Sunday in Lent, compassion and listening. This week was compassion and faith, and we're talking about, again, action through that. But compassion and listening. And how do those relate? Let's finish with a prayer. And this is called the Merton Prayer, from Thoughts in Solitude. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself, and the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with and will never leave me to face my perils alone. Amen. Thank you, everyone.